All right, welcome everyone to another training with our February focus on forms. Today is an exciting one because we have a brand new form that this is the official release of it. Nobody really has seen it outside of staff before this very moment. So those of you who are on this recording, you're the first ones to get to go through it with us. So the way that this one's going to set up is instead of me just droning on like the last couple videos, Rebecca's gonna be my partner in crime on this, and her and I are gonna tag team and go through it together. And so that way then it's not just my brain, but you also have Rebecca's brain, which is fantastic and very valuable because it was her and Bill who really drafted this whole thing. So we get to hear from the author, co-author herself. So let me share the All right, so this is it. Um, so for those who are familiar with the LCAR purchase agreement, I do believe a lot of it is going to look kind of familiar in that regard. But obviously, yeah, we have, this is 8 pages long. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is a part one of two. We're going to go for about an hour, see how far we get into it. But and if we have to divvy it up into a second recording, maybe next Monday or later this week, we'll do so if need be. But yeah, so we can start off. We have nice date to the purchase agreement right up here at the top, which is convenient to have. Buyer legal names. We don't have addresses because a lot of people often leave those blank.
Blank
And
anyways. Yep.
yeah, not necessary. Is that right, Rebecca, as to why it was left out?
Yes.
All
Not
right.
really necessary here on the purchase agreement, and we find that it gets left blank more often than it gets filled in.
Yes, and so rather than having something that then people question, well, you left that blank, like shouldn't that be filled in? Let's just get rid of it if it's not needed. So, then the selling office, selling agent, listing office, listing agent, pretty straightforward there. All right. So the buyer hereby offers and agrees to purchase subject to easements and restrictive covenants of record the following property in the check one of the three city, village, township of Genoa Township, county of Livingston, then described as follows with the legal description, also known as, then this is the address that is commonly known as, with a tax ID number. So keep in mind when you're filling out an offer, the address alone in this blank is not sufficient. You definitely need to have either, the legal description or the tax ID number, or ideally both, because, address alone can cause issues later on if there's later a dispute over what exactly was the property being sold. All right, and then it gets into the boilerplate of what all the fixtures should be identified as. Um,
And
so,
this, we did have some.
all right, we already have a question. Since there's room at the end of the paragraph, can the address line be extended?
uh,
So,
to a degree, yes.
okay, all right, so we
It's
can,
just the way it does the lines. I can certainly make it a little bit longer. Uh,
yeah, that would make sense to get, the together started down here by extending out this address line. Um,
yep.
I think that's a good suggestion, Rob. All right. So the listed off fixtures are lighting fixtures, shades, blinds, drapery, curtain, and drapery curtain hardware and rods, all bathroom mirrors, attached generators,
Just
attached
the
to,
bathroom mirrors might be different than what you guys have in your current ones, because I know some of
yes.
the ones that we reviewed did not include the bathroom mirrors. So again, if you're
Well,
going to
yeah, it used to be
this, just
that,
something to keep in mind.
yeah, if mirrors were just hung in the bathroom and not affixed, then there's purchase agreement um, versions out there that wouldn't necessarily include those mirrors. Here, we are explicitly saying, if it's a mirror in the bathroom, part of this is you as a buyer's agent, what sorts of things should you be able to take for granted? You shouldn't have to, when you're on the showing, touch the bathroom mirror and make sure that it's affixed rather than hung. If it's in the bathroom, you should safely be able to assume, hey, this is going to be part of the transaction. Those sorts of things that, yeah, if we write an offer, what assumptions are allowed when it comes to a bathroom or a mirror in the bathroom, it's going to be included, whether it's hung or affixed. Ventilating fixtures, screens, storm doors and windows, garage door openers and transmitters, water softener, rental units accepted, and water treatment systems, built-in appliances, heating unit, including wood stove and fireplace gas logs, mailbox, awnings, TV mounts, so any TV, flat screen TV mounts to the wall being included automatically, all TV antenna, landscaping, flagpole, all audio security systems, including Wi-Fi security equipment and related equipment. So that's an interesting one. Does that include Ring doorbells?
It does.
Okay.
So that Ring doorbell comes with the house unless you specifically exclude it.
That's a key one. Okay. Central vacuum and attachments, as well as the following personal property for which a bill of sale shall be given. So here you have the included for listing off the additional appliances that are not built in, but you're including like the stove, refrigerator, and such. And then excluded anything that is in the fixtures listed above that are actually being excluded from the sale. So like if it's a dining room chandelier. So yeah, that's, it's where something like a Ring camera, we can now know that it's built into our purchase agreement that if you're using this one, then we are moving forward asking for the Ring camera doorbell, unless they counter back and explicitly exclude it. So this is one reason why it's good to know what's in our purchase agreement, because you get to the final walkthrough and they've switched out the Ring camera with a different doorbell. Does that give your buyer the option to complain, or was it not part of the transaction? If you use this purchase agreement, that Ring doorbell was supposed to be part of the transaction. All right, price. Buyer agrees to pay the sum of, written out in English, full English word dollars, and then the numerical value, in consideration for which the seller will provide a warranty deed subject to existing building and use restrictions and easements and rights of way recorded. Pretty straightforward there.
I did make that line a little bit longer too. So
take it all the way.
That dollars goes all the way to the end now.
Yep.
I didn't realize that it jumped down.
All right. This offer is made subject to financing terms and satisfactory completion of the following conditions as marked. Cash sale, payment of purchase money to be made by wire transfer or equivalent funds. Okay, so if somebody checks that box, is there a contingency here that it's subject to the financing terms of a cash sale? No? Okay, just making sure. Cash sale with new mortgage. This purchase agreement is contingent upon buyer being able to secure gotta check off which type of mortgage, in the amount of, so how much is the mortgage for, or the percentage of a sale price for a term of typically 30 years, what percentage down, plus mortgage costs, prepaid items, and adjustments in cash. Buyer further agrees to apply for such mortgage within, typically people put in here 5 calendar days from acceptance. That's when, the buyer will choose their lender, start the loan application process, and get that ball rolling. At buyer's own expense, and shall comply with all requirements of said lending institution in a timely manner. All right, important sentence here. If loan approval from the lending institution cannot be obtained at no fault of the buyer within blank days, so 40 days, 30, 45, from the acceptance of this purchase agreement, this purchase agreement may be declared null and void by the seller, and deposit shall be returned to the buyer. Receipt of loan approval from the buyer's lending institution within the time limit will eliminate this contingency. So if you get it clear to close before these number of days are up, so I typically recommend putting a larger number in there, even beyond what later the closing, targeted closing date may be. So, I mean, putting in here 40 or 45 days, just because if those number of days come and go, in theory, yeah, the purchase agreement could be declared null and void by the seller. Is that right, Rebecca?
Yep.
So if we have,
Yeah, so I would disagree with you on the putting it past the future closing date,
okay,
just because if you do go past that closing date, you're gonna need an extension anyways.
right, yes.
But yes, I could see really this ultimately wouldn't matter either way, as long as it's done within those days. They can't null and void it, but they could if you're past your closing date anyways.
Well, yeah, because I'm thinking of that situation where, we're trying to close 30 days out. So that's our targeted closing date on this purchase agreement. 28 days have come and gone and we don't have the clear to close, so we're gonna need an extension. But if the seller is like, hey, I don't want to give you the extension, but our buyer's still making a good faith effort to move forward with the deal, I don't want to ideally give them multiple ways in which they could try to counter argue that, hey, we're allowed to declare it null and void. So if you put 40 days in here, even though you're targeting a 30-day closing, then at least this clause does not give them that ability to say, well, in your financing, you only had 40 days to get, or 30 days to get the clear to close. It's been 30 days. So regardless of the closing target, we're enacting this thing to say that a purchase agreement is able to be declared null and void by the seller. So that's why I would put 40 in there, but that's, I guess to each their own decision on that one. If you're going to be doing a land contract, private mortgage, seller finance, you have a little option here and you'll need an addendum. All right, the EMD, buyer agrees to supply a deposit of however many thousand within 2 calendar days after acceptance of this purchase agreement. That makes that so much nicer that is built right in, that they have 2 calendar days from when the purchase agreement is accepted, rather than needing the EMD at the time of writing this offer. Since so often people have been putting in there upon acceptance, or indicating that they don't have the EMD at the moment of writing this offer. I like that this is built in now to just give us that 2-day grace period.
Rob, I see that you asked that it's supposed to be business days. Legally, yes. Technically, it is business days. As far as when we legally have to have that EMD deposited, we wanted to be very consistent in this contract and count everything on calendar days so that it is very obvious for everyone using it what those days are. So yeah, if you write this and this gets accepted on a Saturday, Sunday's not technically a business day, we'd still want the EMD by Monday.
And
really, we would still have to have it deposited by Monday.
Well, isn't it that we have to deposit it within 2 days of receipt? 2 business days. So if we don't get it till Monday, we have to deposit it by Wednesday. But so that's why, when it comes to our clients, they should be operating on a calendar day basis. We internally may operate on a business day basis when it comes to the artist money deposit. But that's where, if they get it to us 2 days after the offer is accepted, we're not violating the rules if we don't deposit it right then and there that day. We still have 2 days from when we receive it. All right, so then you can indicate what type of, what is the form of the EMD: cash, check, promissory note, electronic funds transfer, aka
Yep, that's the earnest money deposit, is that electronic funds transfer. So if you guys use that, typically that's the one you're going to want to check.
To be held by, and this is where it's easy just to check off as being held by us, or if you want to have it held by Select Title or somebody else. Which deposit shall be applied to the purchase price at closing. All right, so I love that we have this added to the EMD section. An additional sum of blank shall be tendered within blank calendar days of the removal of the inspection contingency. So rather than, there's been offers where people put in the EMD, but then they add a little clause that it's, not until after the inspection has been satisfied is when they'll deposit the EMD. If that is the style in which you like to write offers, well, here you can, use this line for that purpose, built in, ready to go. You should have something as an EMD just to get the offer accepted, but then make it clear, like, hey, once the inspection is satisfied, then buyer will put in a more substantial EMD. So you could just have like $1,000 to start out, but then an additional 4,000. If your normal EMD for that price of a house would be 5,000. Something just to try to make it where we have less of a EMD fight if the deal falls through due to the inspection. So having a smaller amount to begin with. But then, because the whole point of the EMD is if the buyers were to default, to protect against the buyer defaulting. If they're trying to back out during the inspection period, they're not really defaulting. And so it's not necessarily best practice to have a lot of their money tied up if the seller wants to engage in a fight over that earnest money deposit. But obviously, if they get past the inspection, then yes, they need to have, a higher EMD, or they arguably should, to show that they are not going to willy-nilly walk away later and default on the contract. All right. If held by RE/MAX Platinum shall comply with the Michigan Occupational Code and related rules. So that states that we're following the law, and then if the sale is not consummated, any release of the buyer's deposit will require a mutual release from the purchase agreement signed by all parties. So we're making it clear that we're not just going to willy-nilly release it without clear instructions of a fully executed mutual release. Obviously, we can be overruled if a court order comes in. So if they do go to small claims, a court order can supersede such a sentence, but we're trying to make it as clear as we can that we require a mutual release to release the EMD.
Shelly, we will be sending it up to SkySlope. It will be in dotloop. I am still trying to figure out who controls the transaction desk ones that get put up there. If I can figure that out, I will, of course, be sending this in to them to be added to that as well. So hopefully it will be up there. I've got to figure out who actually handles the transaction desk ones.
All right. The buyer broker compensation. RE/MAX Platinum's compensation and fees for services are not set by any board or association of realtors, MLS, or law, and are fully negotiable between RE/MAX Platinum and the client or customer. In addition to any other amounts seller may have agreed to pay under other provisions of this purchase agreement, seller agrees to pay on behalf of buyer X% of the purchase price, or a flat amount of dollars, toward buyer broker compensation to RE/MAX Platinum. So this is where you should be putting in your 3%. Or checking off no buyer compensation requested, or Remax Platinum shall be compensated by a separate agreement between the listing broker and Remax Platinum. So if the listing broker is offering 3% and you want to get the broker to broker compensation agreement signed by the listing broker, then you can check this off, because this is saying that the seller will be paying us, whereas the broker to broker compensation agreement has the listing broker paying us. So if you run into that situation where, you know, the listing agent says they'd prefer for it to be a broker to broker compensation, you have that option. But you clearly want to check one of these boxes, and that's where just writing in 3% but not checking the box, that does not cause this sentence to take effect. You have to check the box for it to take effect. That is something that I've seen a lot of agents do. Like later on, when you have that whole list of different stuff, they'll fill out like a closing date or an expiration of the offer, but they won't check the box. If you have multiple check boxes, if you don't check the box, the language that comes after does not apply. So be very precise in knowing how to properly fill this out.
And then the last line on this one is actually pretty important. We cannot receive compensation for brokerage services from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed upon in a written buyer agency agreement. So if you guys are getting your exclusive buyer agencies signed at 2% or 1%, and then you come over here and ask for 3%, we can't get 3% unless you change what's on your exclusive buyer contract. So make sure that whatever you're going to be asking for matches up on there, or is at least less than what you have on the exclusive buyer contract.
Yes. Yeah, if you have a buyer contract for 3%, but this gets negotiated to, you offer, asking 3%, but they counter back at 2.5%. If that's what you come to terms with, at least it's, not beyond what your contract allows you to receive. And so this will require both parties to initial here. Broker compliance fee, buyer is agreeing to pay a compliance transaction fee of the $4.95 or more, payable to Remax Platinum at closing. So just further spelling out into this purchase agreement, trying to be transparent about who is paying what at closing. The fun one, property inspections. Note, inspections required by FHA, VA, lenders, or municipalities are not made for, nor should they be relied upon by a buyer. So that's, good old cover our liability boilerplate that, they shouldn't just assume because the city is doing a city inspection that they don't need to get their own. No, they are hereby acknowledging that we recommend that the buyer conduct an independent private inspection of the property at the buyer's expense. Due diligence may include, but is not limited to, any inspections or research deemed necessary by the buyer, including structural integrity, condition of the mechanical systems, environmental status, health and safety concerns, surveys, and/or infestations. To ensure the property suits the intended use for the buyer, it is recommended that buyer research square footage, building and use restrictions, easements, ordinances, regulations, school district, and/or property taxes. So this is a cover everything the buyer may be interested in, whether it has to do with the house or the location or anything. This gives them total authority to decide the scope in which they want to do due diligence on this property during the inspection period.
So this is broader than some of the ones we've currently seen, in that it does let them look at anything and everything to determine if the property is right for them during that time.
Yeah. I remember one, this was probably like 2011. My client were at the inspection and he realized, oh wait, the garage door, he has a big truck and he couldn't get his truck into the garage. And it's like, okay, that's not a defect in the property, but yeah, you want to be able to just say, hey, this does not suit the intended use of the buyer. So anything the buyer wants to, view as part of what they intend to use the property for, they can, during the inspection period, do that due diligence, and if they find something that they're not satisfied with, they have an out. All right. If the buyer does not notify seller in writing within 7 calendar days after acceptance of this purchase agreement that buyer is dissatisfied with the results of due diligence, this contingency will be deemed waived. So that, whatever number of days you put in here, if those number of days come and go and you have not told them that there's a problem, then this is no longer something that you can come back and try to renegotiate over. So I would recommend 7, 8. I wouldn't be putting 3 in here unless it's, you have a inspector ready to get in there the next day. Because keep in mind, it's not about, how many days to do the inspections, how many days to do the inspections, get the results back, review the results, and decide if you're satisfied or not. So if you're doing, a septic inspection or a well inspection, and they got to send out for water. I do think, is there a separate well and septic down here? I forget.
There is a well and septic addendum that is separate should you need it.
Okay.
But it is not part of this purchase agreement.
Yeah. But okay, think of like a radon. If you, put 7 calendar days in here and on day 6, the inspector puts a radon test in the basement and he's not going to pick it up until day 8. Well, if that comes back high on day 8, oh well, you didn't object during the 7 days or however many you put in there. If in buyer's sole judgment, so they need not explain themselves, buyer is dissatisfied with the results of due diligence, buyer shall do one of the following within the time period specified above. They can either present to the seller an amendment for mutual agreement that either cites a list of repairs and or conditions to be remedied, a credit to be applied against the purchase price, and or a price reduction to satisfy the inspection contingency. So they can propose an addendum with either, asking the sellers to make repairs or, to contribute seller concessions so the buyer can do the repairs, or to just reduce the purchase price. Or if they don't want to present an addendum, they can present to seller a notice of dissatisfaction and which will render the purchase agreement null and void, in which case the seller agrees to execute a mutual release and authorize the deposit holder to return all earnest money to the buyer. So we are upfront having it in writing that the seller is agreeing, they will agree to execute a mutual release if purchaser chooses option B, which is before the end of these number of calendar days, purchaser at their own sole judgment sends over a notice of dissatisfaction. Then seller is agreeing by signing this purchase agreement that they will execute a mutual release that sends the EMD back to the buyer. So it should be pretty strong language to protect your buyer if you come across a seller that wants to be unreasonable and all of that. If this did make it into a small claim situation, it should be pretty cut and dry.
It's really a protection sentence. We've seen a lot recently of sellers fighting giving back deposits during inspection for regardless, whatever the issue might be. This just gives you guys something to point to say, look, you already agreed to this. You really want to try to fight me on it?
Right. Yeah. All right. And so then in the event buyer's chosen option A and seller and buyer are unable to reach agreement to the buyer's proposals in A within 2-3 calendar days of the buyer's notice to the seller, so not how many days after this has come and gone, but the number of days after this has been presented, sent over to the seller. So you could have 7 days in here, but on day 3, send them an addendum saying, hey, we want you to replace the roof. So then the time starts that they have 2 calendar days to respond to your addendum about replacing the roof. But if they're unable to reach an agreement during those 2 days, buyer shall either elect to move forward with the transaction by waiving this contingency in writing, or either party may declare this purchase agreement null and void, and both parties agree to execute a mutual release and authorize the deposit holder to return all earnest money to the buyer. So yeah, if you do your inspections and your buyer wants to roll the dice and ask for $10,000 seller concession, if you send over that addendum and 2 days go by and they don't agree to the $10,000 seller concession, then the buyer has the option to choose, okay, I'll go forward even without the concession. Or if they don't put that in writing, then it's giving the seller or the buyer, either party, the opportunity at that point to declare it null and void.
And this is in there. It does actually, it's going to protect both sides. Basically, no one's going to hold up trying to make a decision on negotiating what's in that addendum or amendment, because after that, either you guys could back out. So if the buyer's not willing to budge on anything, the seller can say, look, we're just not going to have this conversation anymore. I'm out. And give the EMD back. Or same on the buyer side, if the seller's not budging, not willing to negotiate, they have that opportunity to say, look, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore, and get their EMD back. Tammy, you asked why the days after inspection to notify was excluded. I'm assuming you're asking about, I know in some PAs we have like X days to do the inspection, and then X days after you get the results of the inspection. Okay, yeah, so that we changed up for a couple of reasons. We had a lot of things where you get different results on different days, and it was leading to some confusion on, well, I didn't get my water test back until Friday, but I got the general inspection test back on Wednesday. Can I still ask for stuff from the general inspection, even though it's past the, more than 2 days past when I got that inspection results back versus the water results back? So in this case, we're just saying, look, you have X number of days to get back any results you need to get back. And we'll give you what we need based on that, instead of having it kind of be broken up. Notify instead of two.
Is there additional questions?
Yeah, Shelly put up.
I don't know why it's not showing me the questions.
Did you hit the little chat button at the bottom?
Since I'm screen sharing, I think it's.
Oh, it might not let you. So that one, the next comment was the change of notify instead of inspect.
Completing competing offer, the listing agent doesn't read and views this as 10 days to do the inspection, when the competing buyer's PA says 5 days to complete the inspection.
So if your PA says 5 days to complete the inspection, does that mean to get the results back or to have it done? There's some potential inconsistencies with wording it as completed, like when the inspection is completed.
Okay, yeah. So to do the inspection and then like Tammy said, X days after to respond, but that's where because you have an inspection occur and results can roll in on a timeline of multiple days, then anything that says, hey, you're gonna respond within X number of days of getting the results, is it you, okay, so you do the inspection, you know the roof is bad, but you're still waiting on the results of the radon and or the water test. Do you start renegotiating over the roof? Or do you wait for all of the inspection items and reports and that starts the clock? But then it gets really confusing really quickly. Because and so this is just meant to be cleaner, yes. As far as if we're in a bidding war, we want our offers to be competitive. I personally think even just from a listing agent side, a clean inspection contingency is preferable to something that has the timelines broken up into maybe shorter segments, but then just is likely to add to confusion.
Yeah, so Marla, to answer your question, if your tests aren't back within that first calendar days, so if the buyer does not notify seller in writing within X days after acceptance of the purchase agreement, if you don't have the results back, then yeah, you're going to need to extend your inspection period. So that's a little bit different than automatically having that ability to wait for results. And I'll agree with Jordan here. From the listing side of it, I don't know how long it's going to take your water guy to get your water test results back. So if I'm agreeing to a 5-day inspections period and you do your inspection on day 5 and your water guy doesn't get back for a week, does that mean now I've just given you 13 days of an inspection period? This way you're locking it in and saying, I'm going to give you an answer in this many days, one way or another, or ask to extend it for whatever reason.
Because we all know, I mean, inspections are one of the biggest friction points when fights start to occur, and fights occur when there is vagueness or unclarity as to what is supposed to, different interpretations, I guess. So trying to have language that does not have multiple interpretations. I mean, that was the goal in writing this inspection section, is just making it where, you know, two people reading this, they're going to have the same takeaway as to what it means. Because when you get into the nitty gritty of actually getting inspections done, you any sort of vagueness, and that's where our previous purchase agreement had vagueness that caused problems, and we had, if we're redoing the purchase agreement, we have to get rid of that vagueness and have it be as black and white as possible with the inspections.
And it might be a change in when you're presenting your offer or emailing it over, if it is, since it is new and it isn't necessarily exactly how most of the ones we typically see are written, just letting them know, look, we'll make sure we have you either an addendum or we'll let you know that we want to back out by 10 days or 7 days or whatever that number is, versus having it be that unknown because you don't know when you'll get results.
And this is where you need to be very clear with your buyers to say, hey, if we're doing a 7 calendar day inspection period, understand that, yeah, I mean, you can't have the inspector put the radon test in there on day 6. You need, because they're going to need 2 days. So make sure that the inspector knows we need the report, the actual radon results by day 6 or 7, so like you can review it and decide that you're satisfied with it. Otherwise, that's not going to fall under the scope of what we can renegotiate on if we get the results back on day 8 that there's high radon. So just giving your buyers a heads up as to what this means. And that's why, I mean, yeah, and it's easier to get your clients to understand what it means when it is black and white, clear as day. Or our previous purchase agreement, I couldn't say with confidence exactly what it meant in every situation. And so it was difficult for me to explain that to clients. So that's why it's like, yeah, we're all better off with specificity and yes, if it means then in practice, making sure that this number is as large as you need it to be rather than erring on the side of too small, because too small will cause problems on the other end of it. So
That- uh, Tammy, I see what you're saying. It depends on which listing purchase agreement you were using previously. So in some of the purchase agreements we had agents using previously, it was, 5 days to complete the inspection and then 2 days after results to provide notice. In some, it was actually written like this. So we've had it, there are different PAs out there that do it different ways.
and that's where, yeah, so the Fenton and Grand Blanc office. So Tammy, what you've been using in Sky Slope, if that was our internal purchase agreement, that was, yeah, where you had 7 days plus two, making it 9. And it was one that was a flawed inspection. And that's why the Brighton office switched over to LCAR. One reason why the Brighton office stopped using our internal one is just because of the number of fights that arose from that inspection clause. And so instead of having multiple day numbers in there that you have to add together before action is taken, you have one number that decides whether or not action is taken before that is up. And then if action is taken, you have another number to decide, okay, here's how long then you have to agree. And if that number goes by, then either party can be like, hey, we're done.
And I don't think, as far as like concern on the listing side, that this should be a listing agent shouldn't see this different than the old one and say this is longer, because the old one said 7 days to do it, and then 2 days after test results were received. If the listing agent's reading it, they know that's a minimum of 9, if not more. Because then we don't know if they're going to get the results the day after the test is done, 2 days after, 3 days after. We just don't know. And so that's much more open-ended. And on the listing side would be something that you could look at and say, oof, I don't like that being open-ended. I want it to be specific.
All right, so here we will be having our client's initial that we've recommended they obtain an inspection of the property. Underneath though, they can, instead of all this above, they can choose not to have an inspection contingency and accept it as is. So if you're checking this box, then it's all, hyphens anyway, it's just NA. Hold on. Wait, is there a well and septic inspection? So I know at one point this.
No, I was asked to take that out.
Oh,
and make it a separate addendum.
Okay, all right.
So instead, what you have is down in the bottom, there's a list of checkboxes like you typically see in our current like LCAR one. In that section, if you keep scrolling down there.
Okay, I'll jump ahead.
Yeah.
In here?
Yep. So there is subject property is serviced by a well and or septic system. There is a new well and or septic addendum that we have written up for that specifically.
Okay, all right. Because yeah, I mean that's the most common inspection conundrum. Like with the old one, it's like, yeah, you do the home inspection on day 2, you do the well and septic on day 5. Yeah, and our clause about having 2 days from when reports are received, it's like, well, all the stuff you found wrong with the house on day 2, when can you, like, do you lose your ability to renegotiate because you're waiting for the well and septic inspection as well? But all right,
And if
we can.
we will go over that one too. That is one that if you guys are on a well or septic, you're going to want to make sure you check that box and use the addendum that's going with it.
Yeah. All right. So municipal inspections. If the county or municipality in which the property is located requires an inspection prior to closing and or occupying, the seller shall pay for the inspection and any repairs required to obtain the written approval of the county or municipality unless otherwise agreed in writing. So it's putting all the responsibility on the seller, as it should, in my view. Because yeah, I mean, they have to get the municipality to give them permission to sell. It's on them to acquire that by doing repairs or whatever it may be, because it has nothing to do with your specific buyer. It's any buyer that they want to sell to. So it makes sense to put that on the seller's shoulders. Survey contingency. This purchase agreement is contingent upon the buyer's satisfaction with a boundary stake survey to be paid for by the buyer or seller. The party paying for the survey shall select the surveyor and order the survey within blank days of acceptance of this purchase agreement. If buyer does not object to the survey within 7 days of receipt, this contingency shall be deemed waived, or more often than not, you'll be checking this one, buyer chooses not to obtain a survey of the property. So if they check this one, then this is creating a separate inspection type contingency running concurrently with the property inspection above. Because surveys can take a while, it can take, a couple weeks to get a surveyor out there and to get the survey. So you don't want this to be only part of this inspection period, because you'd have to have this be way too long. So it makes sense to separate it out. That all makes sense. But yeah, so this has nothing about how long it will take to get the survey. It says how long it'll take to order the survey, and then how long, once the survey is received, how long buyer has to, be okay with it. So if the nice thing is, if the surveying company, it has a delay and they're 2 weeks out, you're not then having to write an addendum to modify this contingency. The timeline is going to be what it's going to be based on the third party contractor's ability to get it done. All right, flood insurance. Buyer may that's supposed to be his instead of this.
Yep.
His, her own expense, obtain a floodplain certification within blank calendar days from the date of seller's acceptance of this agreement. If the certification discloses that the property is in a special flood hazard area, buyer may notify seller in writing within blank days from the date of the certification that the buyer declares this agreement null and void, and the deposit shall be returned to the buyer. Failure to notify the seller that the property is in a special flood hazard area within the same period shall constitute a waiver of buyer's right to terminate the agreement under this paragraph, and buyer agrees to obtain a policy of flood insurance if required to do so by the mortgage lender. So typically, I've never built contingencies like this into my offers. Rebecca, do you anticipate this being something that people do more than 0 calendar days?
If we are talking about property that is on one of the lakes,
Mhm.
by the river, creek, if you have reason to be concerned that it might be within a floodplain,
Yeah.
I would definitely put a number there that is not 0.
And so, and what would probably make the most sense is to have it be the same as what's up here for your inspections, to just incorporate it into the due diligence of the inspection period.
Yes. And this
and-
one's similar to the survey one. We called it out separately because it is one that can sometimes take longer, has some different concerns with it.
Okay. Because I don't know, I don't actually know, I'm not familiar at all with the process of obtaining floodplain certification. Interesting. Okay,
It's another one where we can't really rely on, it's not like it's up to the buyers to schedule it, get it done, yada, yada, yada. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer.
yeah.
There's time
Oh.
considerations not within their control.
Rob says it's easy. So, okay. Thank you, Rob. All right. Heating and cooking fuels. So if there's a propane tank out there, you're checking the box here saying that the fuel tank is owned and included in the sale, or it is rented and buyer will be responsible for continuing the lease. So if there happens to be a propane tank, before you write this offer, you may want to verify with the listing agent which of these two boxes you should be checking. All right, liquid heating and cooking fuels in the tanks are included in the sale and will transfer to buyer at time of possession. Obviously, so seller can't just drain the tank. Seller is responsible for maintaining heating and cooking liquid fuels at an operational level and shall not permit fuels to fall below 25% in the tanks at time of possession. Seller is precluded from removing fuel from tanks other than what is depleted through normal use. So this is very important if you happen to have like an occupancy situation where it's, they have to have it at least 25% at the time of possession, not at the time of the closing. So if you're closing in December, but with 60 days of occupancy before they get possession, they can't just start removing the fuel other than just using it normally, but they can't allow normal use to result in it getting below 25% before your clients take possession. So this is definitely written for our clients' benefit, but it's also the very reasonable expectation in a home sale, in my view.
And the other reason we put some of these in here is to try to catch the things that we as buyer's agents might not always think to ask or think to know of or think to look into. Propane tanks is definitely one of those we see a lot. We get to the closing table and find out it's leased or that it was owned that it was leased and now the buyer's taking on another cost they weren't expecting. This is one of those we put in that's really more of a heads up for you as the agent to say, do I need to ask these questions? And if I do, how do I protect my client?
Yeah, I like that this is in here. Or you check the box if it doesn't have a fuel tank. All right, title insurance, fun. Seller shall provide buyer at seller's expense an owner's policy and title insurance from a title company of the seller's choice in the amount of the purchase price. Said policy to be, check one of these below, with standard exceptions, without standard exceptions, and then if the chosen owner's policy is unavailable, then a with standard exceptions policy shall be issued. And then you have also, if you've checked this box, you have to decide, is it the seller or buyer who is to pay the cost of the survey if it's required to obtain this. So if title company can't provide this, then it automatically reverts to this. If the title company can provide this, but a survey is required, then you need to have identified up front who's paying for that survey. Or you can ask for the expanded coverage, but again, if this is not available, then without standard shall be issued. But then again, if this is not available either, then it goes up to this. So, I often for my buyers would just check this box, but then it turns out, the sellers didn't live there for 2 years or whatever the things that, they don't qualify to be able to provide the expanded coverage. So then it gets reverted down. It's how it would always work out, but this at least explicitly shows that is to be the case, which I think is an improvement over our previous title insurance clauses. Seller will apply for a commitment for title insurance within 7 calendar days after the date of acceptance of this purchase agreement. So basically that means you as the listing agent or whoever the listing agent is, needs to turn this file in within, a couple days, so that then it gets to their, to select title if you're on the listing side, so that they can do the, apply for the title commitment. You can't just hold on to this if you're the listing agent and wait until after inspection to turn it into the office in the title company. Upon receipt of the commitment, buyer shall have 7 calendar days to provide seller with written notice of any objections. So, when you, as the agent, the buyer's agent, get the title commitment, you should forward that on to your buyers and suggest that they review it, because if there's anything in there that they are not happy with, then they need to say within 7 days of having received it. Seller will then have 30 days after receiving written notice to remedy the claim defect. So if there's a cloud on title or anything, this is giving them 30 days to satisfy all that. All right, hold on. Rob asked if we select the expanded coverage and it turns out to not be available, how do we know who pays for the survey if required? Ooh, that's a good question.
That is a very good question. I'm wondering if we need to move that down below the expanded so it applies to all 3 regardless.
Yeah, that is a darn, because I was the one who suggested putting it with the without, because that's the only time it really applies. I mean, what I would say is if this box here is seller is checked, but then this, and then this is not allowed, it goes to this, but this is already pre-checked. Would that make sense? All right. Yeah, that's a good one though that we have to, I think, consider. Yeah.
I've highlighted it to come back. It'll either get moved out so it applies to either.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I know that, if you don't have this box checked, same without, then all the stuff that comes after is kind of moot.
Right.
But then if this one is checked and then this clause applies, it's kind of checking this box for us at that point. So the boxes that are checked, that would be my argument. But I guess, that is one of that open to interpretation, which is what we want to avoid. Now is the time to work out those kinks and make any adjustments if needed. So good catch, Rob. All right. So yeah, seller will have 30 days to clear up title. Should the seller be unable or unwilling to remedy the defects within 30 days, this purchase agreement shall be terminated and the deposit will be refunded to the buyer. Alternatively, the buyer may choose to waive the defect and proceed with the transaction. So if there's a cloud on title and the buyer still wants to go through accepting the fact that there's that cloud out there, title company will, exclude it from the insurance policy and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's building into this the ability for the seller to have 30 days. So it's, not like the buyer can try to say, hey, seller, failed to comply with the purchase agreement in the contract. If the seller needs a delay for this, then we're giving them that delay. All right. When applicable, buyer may obtain a loan policy from a title company of buyer's choice. Obviously, if they're doing financing, that will come into play.
It's funny you say obviously, but there are PAs out there where that is not true. There are PAs out there that define exactly which title company both sides are using.
Oh, yes. No, yeah. And that's where the buyer's choice is very important here. Yes, because I mean, there's purchase agreements out there that don't even give the seller a choice. They tries to say up front who the seller will be using. But yeah, so they get rid of the seller's choice up here. But no, we allow our clients to choose whatever title companies. Obviously, we recommend they use Select Title because they do a fantastic job, and it's nice to be able to walk down the hall and talk to them. But you know, our contracts are going to allow for our clients to use any title company of their choice. All right, let's do closing costs and real estate taxes. No, let's do closing costs and then wrap it up there since we're an hour into it. And then we'll just have to keep it going on our next class. But closing costs. Unless otherwise provided in this purchase agreement, it is agreed that the seller shall pay all state and county transfer taxes and costs required to convey marketable title. Makes sense? Unless otherwise provided in this purchase agreement, buyer shall pay the cost of recording the deed and or security interest, all mortgage closing costs required by their lender, and any buyer closing fee charged by the title insurance company agency that issues the loan policy in a lender finance sale. So yes, if they're obtaining a loan policy up here, buyer is responsible for that title, all those closing. All right, but for the title insurance for the seller's policy, seller and buyer shall split equally any closing fees charged by the title insurance company in a cash or seller financed sale. Any transfer or status letter fees charged by a homeowners or condo association shall be split equally between buyer and seller. So that's one that I mean, I think is the equitable outcome. And I mean, it's one that I've seen it go in either direction where it's always, for the sellers to pay for those sorts of HOA fees. I've seen it where it's expected that buyers. Here we're just making it that, hey, both sides 50-50 split any of those fees. So, if you're on the recipient side of this purchase agreement, I don't think you should object. And if you're on the buyer agent side, I think that, this is a good paragraph for our clients as well. So it doesn't put all of the membership cost into the, to join the neighborhood, that sort of thing, doesn't fall solely on the buyer. All right. So at closing, seller agrees to contribute. Here's where you would have any sort of seller concessions. Seller agrees to contribute up to either a dollar amount or percent of the purchase price towards buyer's closing costs, prepaid items, property tax prorations, escrows, insurance, and or any other fees allowable by the lender. So it's nice to have that written in there where, you don't have to come up with the language. If we used to have it as you have to type it in or add it to an addendum. Here it's built in, just put in, your 3% or $5,000 seller concessions. And with that, we'll wrap it up before we get into, we have a lot still to go. This is a long contract, but it's good stuff. So we'll pick it up next time, starting with the real estate taxes. Are there any last questions, though, about the content that we have covered in these first 13 clauses? And you can unmute if you don't want to type it. If
I have
not,
no problem. I have no problem
all right.
with any of what you're doing. I just really wanted to make a comment. It's fantastic that we have one contract that all locations are going to be using. I'm really looking forward to that. There is such a rigmarole out there of what's being used. Consistency, I think, is really important.
I 100% agree. Yes.
And that is in part why it ended up being as long as it is.
Well, yeah, because it has to account for the local variances between, customs between all the way from Grand Blanc down to Ann Arbor, because Ann Arbor real estate is, does things a little differently sometimes than Grand Blanc.
And I also wanted to share that I was glad that you included the county of Lenawee, because we actually do a lot of business in Lenawee. The Ann Arbor office does, and I certainly do.
Yep.
Would you
Well, yeah.
consider adding Hillsdale to the tax?
Do you know which side it would go in?
I think it's in the same section as Lenawee, and I'll confirm that. I seem to be always confused by that, but I'll tell you, I find myself in there quite a bit, and it backs right up to Jackson County. So,
Yeah, I am happy to add into those when we get to the tax section and talk about that. I'm
Yep.
happy to add in counties to whichever one they should be properly attributed to. I
All right.
don't know which ones those are.
okay, all right, appreciate that.
All right, well, I appreciate you all hopping on today, and we'll get the next one scheduled. Because I don't necessarily want to wait a whole week before we do, so keep an eye on your email, and we'll get the next one, because I want to get through this. Maybe it will take 3 iterations, but I think breaking it up an hour long is needed. Will lawn and snow removal be included in this contract for the seller to comply with? Do we have anything about lawn
You mean
care?
like during occupancy or while it's listed?
So, you do the final walkthrough and the sidewalk's not shoveled, driveway's not cleared.
Got it.
That's a good one that I know, if you have all the trees have shed their leaves, is that on the buyers when they do their final walkthrough that, they're taking on, or during occupancy. When the buyers take possession, are they taking possession of it with cleared of snow and or leaves?
So when we go through number 18, condition of the property, we do outline that it is until possession is delivered. The seller has to keep the property in substantially the same condition as of the date of this purchase agreement. So that includes maintaining heating well, septic, plumbing, electrical system, landscape system, irrigation system, and any other equipment in normal working order. The roof watertight, and to maintain the grounds. So yes, that is included in maintaining it in its current condition until possession.
Yeah.
So that includes occupancy.
Well, that's good. All right. So keep an eye on your email, and we'll and hopefully you can join us for the next recording too. Thank you all.